The vast chamber of the Galactic Council hung in the silent void above Viridia Prime, a gas giant whose swirling violet storms cast eerie shadows across the dome's inner walls. Inside, representatives from 23 starfaring species sat around a circular table made of polished obsidian, their faces lit by soft blue light from floating data orbs. But one section of the table remained empty. The human seats, 3 high-backed chairs with subtle Earth symbols carved into the armrests, sat untouched, cold, and quiet. No one had seen a human delegate in over 3 weeks. Worse, every attempt to contact Sol system had failed. Hails went unanswered. Data requests bounced back with error codes. Even the routine status pings from human outposts along the Orion trade corridor had stopped. It was as if the entire human civilization had vanished overnight, leaving behind only silence. Counselor Vex of the Qatari Syndicate shifted uncomfortably in his segmented exoskeleton. His 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of deep unease among his people. "This is unacceptable," he rasped, his voice like grinding stone. "We cannot run galactic affairs with a key member absent and unresponsive." Ambassador Lyra of the Zenthari Collective, her slender form wrapped in flowing silver robes, did not reply at once. She stared at the empty human console, her large, dark eyes unreadable. Unlike Vex, she had always respected humanity's quiet persistence. They were young, yes, barely 2 centuries into interstellar travel. But they had built fast, learned faster, and never once broke a treaty. Until now. "They have not declared war," Lyra finally said, her voice calm but edged with concern. "They have not sent threats. They have simply gone silent." "That is worse," muttered Groln, the bulky envoy from the Brack hegemony, his thick fingers drumming on the table. "Silence is the mask of preparation." In the observation gallery above, junior aides whispered among themselves. Some feared an invasion. Others wondered if a plague had struck Earth. A few even speculated that humanity had achieved transcendence and left the physical plane altogether. But none of those theories explained the automated defense drones now patrolling the edge of human-controlled space. Drones that politely but firmly turned away all non-human vessels with the same message. "Unauthorized entry prohibited. Return to your jurisdiction." Back on Earth, far from the anxious eyes of the Council, life continued, but not as usual. Cities still glowed at night, trains still ran on time, and children still played in parks. Yet a quiet tension hung in the air, like the stillness before a storm. On the moon, inside the Lunar Command Hub, Captain Daniel Brooks stood at the edge of a wide observation window, watching Earth hang in the blackness like a blue jewel. His uniform was crisp, his posture straight, but his eyes were tired. Beside him, Dr. Lena Ford adjusted her glasses and sipped lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. She was a xenolinguist by training, but for the past year she had been reassigned to strategic communications. "They're panicking," she said softly. "The Council just sent their 7th emergency query. They're using formal protocol now, begging really." Daniel didn't turn. "Good," Lena frowned. "You don't think this is too extreme? Cutting off everything? No trade, no data, no contact at all?" "We gave them 100 chances," Daniel replied. 100 treaties honored, 100 compromises made. 100 times we swallowed our pride because unity mattered more than fairness. But when they voted to take Helios 7, Eos Prime, and Tarsus without even consulting us, after we spent decades terraforming those worlds, they showed us the truth. To them we're not equals. We're tenants. Lena fell silent. She remembered the day the vote happened. Ambassador Carl Ruiz had stood alone in the council chamber, voice steady but eyes burning, as the non-human delegates raised their hands in unison. Not one spoke against Resolution 887, not one, and when Carl asked why, Lyra had simply said, "The greater good requires sacrifice, but it was always humanity sacrificing." Now, Earth's unified command had activated Protocol Veil, a plan developed in secret over 5 years. Total diplomatic and informational quarantine. No explanations, no negotiations, just a clean, cold wall between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The idea wasn't to provoke war, but to force reflection. If the galaxy needed humanity to function, then maybe, just maybe, it would finally see them as partners, not tools on Mars and the red dust outside New Ares City. Engineer Tyler Grant wiped grease from his hands and looked up at the sky. A supply ship from the Xanthari Collective had just been turned away by Orbital Defense AI. He smiled faintly. For years, off-worlders had treated Martian engineers like cheap labor, praising their work but never inviting them to the design table. Now those same aliens couldn't fix their own life support systems without human-coded patches. Karma, he thought, had a quiet way of arriving. Meanwhile, aboard the orbital station Helios Watch, Commander Nina Patel reviewed security feeds. Every human colony, every research outpost, every mining rig had gone into low-profile mode. Lights dimmed. Transmissions minimized. Even civilian ships stayed within system borders. It wasn't fear that drove them, it was discipline. For once, all of humanity moved as one. Not because a leader commanded it, but because everyone understood why. Back in the council chamber, Vex slammed a clawed fist on the table. "We must act. Send a fleet to the Sol border. Demand answers." Lyra shook her head. "And if they fire on us? Then we've started a war with the species that builds half our medical drones and maintains our quantum comms. Is that what you want?" Grolam grunted. "Maybe they're bluffing." "Maybe," Lyra said. "But what if they're not?" The chamber fell into a heavy silence, different from the one humanity had imposed, but just as thick. For the first time, the council realized they had taken humanity for granted. They had assumed humans would always be there, fixing, building, agreeing, smiling through the insults. But now with that presence gone, the galaxy felt unbalanced. On Luna, Daniel finally turned from the window. "They'll come around," he said. "Not because we forced them, but because they'll miss us." Lena nodded slowly. "Or they'll hate us for it. Either way," Daniel said. "We're no longer invisible." Outside, Earth spun on, quiet and resolute. Its people united not by flags or factions, but by a simple shared choice: enough was enough. And in the endless dark between stars, that silence spoke louder than any war cry ever could. 6 months before the silence began, the Galactic Council had gathered under very different circumstances. The mood was light, almost festive. Delegates sipped nectar from crystal vials and exchanged polite compliments. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Carl Ruiz, a man in his late 50s with silver-streaked hair and calm eyes. He had represented Earth for 12 years, longer than any human before him. He knew the game, the quiet nods, the backroom promises, the careful dance of diplomacy. But that day, something felt wrong. The agenda listed resource allocation review, a routine item. But when Councillor Vex rose to speak, his tone was sharp. He unveiled Resolution 887, a proposal to reclassify 3 human-developed exoplanets, Helios 7, Eos Prime, and Tarsus, as galactic commons. On paper, it sounded fair. In truth, it meant stripping humanity of all rights to those worlds. The justification? Efficient management of rare quantum crystalline deposits vital to all member species. Carl's stomach dropped. Those planets weren't just rocks in space. Helios 7 had breathable air thanks to 50 years of atmospheric seeding. Eos Prime hosted the largest off-world university, where human and alien students studied side by side. Tarsus held the only stable wormhole relay outside council control, built and maintained by human engineers. And now, with a single vote, it would all be taken. Carl stood slowly. "This violates the Orion Accords," he said, his voice steady. "Article 12 clearly states that terraformed worlds remain under the jurisdiction of the species that invested in their development." Lyra of the Xanthari Collective gave him a pitying look. "Times change, Ambassador. The galaxy's needs outweigh historical claims." No one spoke in his defense. Not the Brock, not the Sylth, not even the usually sympathetic Virelians. One by one, the non-human delegates raised their hands. The vote passed unanimously. Carl's protest was logged as minor dissent and filed away. He returned to his quarters that night and stared at a photo on his desk. His granddaughter, Chloe, holding a model of the solar system she'd built in school. She had written on the back, "Grandpa, are we really alone out there?" He hadn't known how to answer then. Now he feared he did. What the council didn't know was that humanity had stopped trusting them long before that vote. Years earlier, after a near disaster on the mining moon of Keswick 9, Earth's intelligence network had begun quietly monitoring private council channels. At first, it was just precaution. But what they found chilled them to the bone. In encrypted chats, Qatari officials joked about monkey, diplomats who still think treaties matter. Xanthari, Trade ministers referred to human colonies as convenient service hubs, and in a leaked memo from the BRAC High Command, Earth was labeled a useful but unstable variable, manageable only through controlled dependency. Worse still, 3 months after Resolution 887 passed, human surveillance picked up unusual activity near the Helios border. A joint Qatari-Zenthari fleet, 27 warships, was assembling under the guise of tactical exercises. Their flight paths, fuel loads, and weapon calibrations all pointed to one objective: disabling human relay stations and cutting off Sol system from the rest of the galaxy before humanity could react. That was the final straw. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, the Unified Command convened an emergency session. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and elected leaders sat in a dimly lit room, faces grim. Admiral Frank Holt, a man with a weathered face and no patience for games, laid out the facts. They're not just taking our worlds. They're planning to isolate us, weaken us, and eventually absorb us piece by piece. Dr. Owen Price, head of the Horizon Initiative, leaned forward. We've been too kind, too eager to please. They see kindness as weakness. After hours of debate, a decision was made. Not war, not surrender, but withdrawal. Total, complete, and absolute withdrawal from the galactic stage. Protocol veil would be activated, all diplomatic ties severed, all data streams cut, all non-essential transmissions halted. Human ships would return to home space, colonies would go dark, and no explanation would be given. The reasoning was simple. If the galaxy only noticed humanity when it needed something, then humanity would stop being needed, until the galaxy learned to value them for who they were, not what they provided. The first sign of the change came quietly. Human freighters stopped docking at Zenthari ports. Medical shipments of nanoserum, used to treat the rare but deadly Varelian lung rot, ceased without warning. Qatari engineers trying to update their fleet's navigation systems found the human-maintained software suddenly locked, with no backdoor access. At first, the Council assumed it was a glitch. Then a protest. Then a bluff. They sent messages, demands, ultimatums. All went unanswered. On Mars, engineer Tyler Grant worked double shifts in the underground fusion labs. His team was rerouting power grids to run independently of the old Council-linked networks. We built half their infrastructure, he told his crew one night, wiping sweat from his brow. Now they'll learn how to fix it themselves. In orbit around Jupiter, Commander Nina Patel oversaw the quiet repositioning of defense satellites. Each one was upgraded with new AI protocols that recognized non-human signatures and denied access without human authorization. No more free rides, she muttered as she approved the final sequence. Back on Earth, schools held special assemblies, not to scare children but to explain. Teachers told students that humanity was taking a step back, not out of fear but out of respect for itself. We gave a lot, said one teacher in Chicago, standing before a classroom of wide-eyed kids. Now we're asking for fairness in return. Chloe Martinez, Carl Ruiz's granddaughter, listened carefully. That night she drew a new star chart, one that included only human worlds connected by lines of silver ink. At the bottom she wrote, "We share when we're respected." Meanwhile on the moon, Daniel Brooks and Lena Ford reviewed the final checklist for Protocol Veil. All embassies closed. All cultural exchange programs suspended. All joint research terminated. The last thing to go was the open comms channel, the one that had linked Earth to the Council for over a century. Lena hesitated before pressing the button. "You sure about this?" she asked. Daniel nodded. They had their chance, she pressed it. The screen went dark. From that moment on, humanity vanished from the galactic conversation. No anger, no drama. Just silence, and in that silence, something new began to grow. Not fear, not hatred, but self-respect. For the first time in generations, humanity was no longer playing by someone else's rules. They were writing their own. The galaxy would notice soon enough. And when it did, it would find a species that had stopped asking for a seat at the table and started building its own. Panic spread through the Galactic Council like a virus. At first, it was just confusion. Why won't the humans answer? Then came frustration. How dare they ignore us? But within weeks, confusion and frustration turned into something far more dangerous. Fear. Because the galaxy, it turned out, could not function without humanity. It started small. A hospital on the Xanthari moon of Lysara reported that its life support units had frozen. Technicians traced the problem to a firmware update that required a human authentication key, now offline. 3 patients died before a workaround was found. Then came the freighters. Qatari cargo ships, used to relying on human-maintained navigation beacons, began drifting off course. One collided with an asteroid field near the Orion Rim, scattering debris across a major trade lane. The Council's own systems began to fail. The translation matrix, a marvel of linguistic engineering that allowed 23 species to speak in real time, started glitching. Words came out wrong. Peace became war. Help became attack. The core algorithms, it was discovered, had been quietly updated every month by a team of human linguists based on Luna. No one else understood the code well enough to fix it. Counselor Vex demanded action. "This is sabotage," he declared, slamming his claws on the table. "They are holding the galaxy hostage with their silence." But Ambassador Lyra shook her head. "Sabotage implies intent to harm. They shut down their own systems too. They're not attacking us. They're just gone." And that was the problem. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were the glue. Their AI managed supply chains across 6 sectors. Their engineers designed the cooling systems for BRAC fusion cores. Their artists created the holographic interfaces used in every embassy. Even the music played in council waiting rooms was composed by a human from New Seattle. Without them, the galaxy felt hollow. On Viridia Prime, citizens began to notice. Shops ran out of medical patches. Public transit schedules became unreliable. Even the weather control satellites over the capital city started behaving oddly, dumping rain during festivals, clearing skies during mourning days. Rumors flew. Some said humanity had been wiped out by a secret plague. Others claimed they'd discovered a new dimension and left everyone behind. But the truth, slowly dawning on more and more people, was simpler and more unsettling. Humanity had chosen to walk away. Protests erupted outside the council dome. Xanthari students held signs that read, "We took them for granted." Qatari merchants chanted, "Bring back the engineers." Even BRAC laborers, known for their stoicism, gathered in silence, holding tools made with human alloys they could no longer replace. The council tried to downplay the crisis. Official statements called the situation temporary and manageable. But behind closed doors, emergency meetings ran late into the night. Who could rebuild the quantum routers? Who understood the biofilters and the water recyclers? The answer again and again was the same. Humans. Desperate, the council turned to the only human still within reach, Eli Dawson. A retired historian in his 60s, Eli had lived on Viridia Prime for 20 years, teaching interspecies history at the Galactic University. He wasn't part of the government. He hadn't spoken to Earth in months. But he was all they had. They summoned him to the council chamber. He arrived in simple clothes, carrying a worn satchel and a thermos of tea. He looked tired but calm. "Can you contact them?" Lyra asked gently. Eli shook his head. "I don't have clearance. Protocol Veil cut all civilian links too." "Then persuade them," Vex growled. "Tell them the galaxy is falling apart." Eli sipped his tea. "You think they don't know?" "They built half the systems failing right now. They know exactly what's happening." "Then why won't they help?" Groln demanded. Eli looked around the room at the polished floors, the glowing orbs, the seats once filled by his people. "Because you never saw them as equals. You saw them as useful. And when something's only useful, you don't miss the person. You miss the service." Silence filled the chamber. Later, alone in his small apartment, Eli stared at an old photo on his desk. It showed him and his students, human and alien, laughing after a field trip to the ruins of old Mars. Back then, the future had felt bright. Now it felt broken. On Earth, life continued in quiet rhythm. Power grids hummed. Trains ran. Children went to school. But everyone knew the galaxy was watching. Everyone knew the weight of their silence. In a workshop in Denver, engineer Jake Morrison tested a new atmospheric processor, one designed without a single piece of council-approved tech. "We don't need their parts," he told his team. "We never did." On the moon, Daniel Brooks reviewed reports from the outer colonies. All secure, all self-sufficient. All silent, Lena Ford joined him at the window. They're hurting out there. They chose this, Daniel said. Not us. Back in the council chamber, Lyra proposed a new idea. What if we admit we were wrong? What if we return the 3 worlds? Repeal Resolution 887? Offer full partnership, not just membership? Vex scoffed. Grovel? To primates? But others were listening. The Sylph envoy nodded slowly. The Varelian delegate whispered, Perhaps humility is the price of survival. Still, no one moved. Pride was a heavy cloak, hard to shed. Meanwhile, on a quiet street in New Ares City on Mars, a young girl named Maya Ellis fixed a broken comms unit with parts she'd salvaged from old drones. Her neighbor, an elderly Qatari who had lived on Mars for 30 years, watched from his porch. You're good with your hands, he said in halting English. Maya smiled. My dad taught me. He used to say, if you build it right, it lasts forever. The Qatari sighed. I miss your dad. He fixed my heater every winter. He's still here, Maya said. We all are. We just stopped giving things away for free. The old alien nodded. He understood. And across the galaxy, more and more beings began to understand too. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They had simply stopped pretending. And in that truth, the first seeds of real change began to sprout. Not through force, not through fear, but through the quiet power of absence. Months passed. The silence from humanity did not break. It deepened like a river carving stone. At first the galaxy had panicked. Then it had pleaded. Now it waited. And in that waiting, something unexpected happened. People began to listen. The first sign came not from governments or generals, but from children. On the Zenthari world of Lysara, a school teacher played an old recording in class, a human folk song about stars and home. The students, used to synthetic melodies and algorithm-composed anthems, sat in stunned quiet. One girl raised her hand and asked, why did they stop sharing their music? The question spread. Soon, students across the galaxy were digging through public archives, watching old human films, reading translated poetry. They learned about human history, the wars, the mistakes, the long climb out of darkness. They saw how humanity had rebuilt after near extinction, how they had reached for the stars not to conquer but to connect. And they began to wonder, what if the humans were right to walk away? Back on Earth, no one knew about this quiet shift. Life continued in steady rhythm. Cities thrived. Farms bloomed under artificial suns. In hidden labs beneath the Rockies, Dr. Owen Price and his team worked tirelessly on Project Horizon. It was not a weapon. It was a key. A new kind of faster-than-light drive that didn't rely on the Council's jump gates or their quantum beacons. With it, humanity could travel anywhere, anytime, without asking permission. Owen wiped sweat from his brow as he watched the final test simulation. The drive hummed softly, its core glowing with a pale blue light. It works, he whispered. We're free. Nearby, young engineer Jake Morrison checked the energy readings. No council tech, no shared code, just us. That's the point, Owen said. We're not leaving the galaxy. We're just refusing to need it. On the moon, Admiral Frank Holt reviewed fleet readiness reports. Every ship was now retrofitted with Horizon-compatible engines. Every colony had independent power, food, and defense. Humanity was no longer a guest in someone else's house. They had built their own. But the biggest change wasn't in technology, it was in spirit. For the first time in generations, humans spoke openly about their worth. In schools, teachers told students, you belong here not because you serve, but because you exist. In town halls, citizens debated not how to please the council, but how to build a future that honored their values. Then came the message. It started as a simple broadcast, unencrypted, sent on every public channel across human space. No fanfare, no warning. Just a girl standing in a sunlit room, holding a hand-drawn star chart. Her name was Chloe Martinez. She was 10 years old. We used to share everything, she said, her voice clear and calm. Our stories, our songs, even our mistakes. But you only saw what you wanted to see. So now we're going quiet. Not because we're angry, because we're done being used. The message lasted less than a minute, but it spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was viewed billions of times across the galaxy. On Zenthari streets, crowds gathered around public screens, watching it again and again. In Qatari markets, merchants paused their work to listen. Even Councillor Vex watched it in private, his many eyes unblinking. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as engineers or medics or soldiers, but as people. A little girl with messy hair and bright eyes speaking not with threats but with truth. Protests grew louder. This time, they weren't just about missing services, they were about justice. "Return their worlds," read one sign on Viridia Prime. "Apologize," said another. A group of young Qatari artists painted a mural of Chloe on the side of a government building, with the words, "We hear you now." Ambassador Lyra watched it all from her office. She felt a strange mix of shame and hope. She remembered Carl Ruiz's tired eyes the day of the vote. She remembered dismissing his pain as human sensitivity. Now she understood. They hadn't just lost allies. They had lost friends. She called an emergency session of the council. "We cannot wait for them to come back," she said. "We must earn the right to speak to them again." Vex scoffed. "Earn? We are the Galactic Council." "We do not beg." "You do if you want to survive," Lyra replied. "Look around. Our systems are failing. Our people are suffering. And the only ones who can truly fix it won't, because we hurt them. Not with weapons, with words. With votes. With silence of our own." This time others agreed. The Sylph envoy proposed repealing Resolution 887. The Varelian delegate suggested returning all human-developed tech and data. Even Groan of the Brack hegemony grunted, "Maybe we were too harsh," but action spoke louder than words. And the galaxy had spent too long speaking without acting. On Earth, Chloe had no idea her message had changed everything. She was just glad her grandpa had smiled when he saw it. Carl Ruiz, now retired, sat on his porch in New Mexico watching the sunset. For the first time in months, he felt peace. In orbit, Commander Nina Patel received a strange signal. It wasn't a hail. It wasn't a threat. It was a single data packet, sent from a civilian Zenthari vessel near the border. Inside was a simple file, the full repeal of Resolution 887, signed by 17 council members. She forwarded it to Lunar Command without comment. Daniel Brooks read it, then passed it to Lena Ford. She studied it for a long time. "They're trying," she said. "Trying isn't enough," Daniel replied. "But it's a start." Deep in the labs, Owen Price powered down the Horizon prototype. The test was over. The future was ready. And across human space, people kept working, kept building, kept living. Not in anger, not in fear, but in quiet dignity. They had not shouted to be heard. They had simply stopped speaking until someone learned to listen. And somewhere, in the vast dark between stars, the first note of a new song began to play. Not of dominance, not of dependence, but of mutual respect. It was soft. It was fragile. But it was real. 1 year after the silence began, the galaxy received a message unlike any before. It was not a demand. It was not an apology. It was simply a set of coordinates and an open invitation. The location was near the edge of human-controlled space, close to the ruins of an ancient station built by a long-vanished species. There, floating in the quiet dark, a new structure had appeared. It was called the Sol Concorde. The Concorde was not a warship. It was not a fortress. It was a meeting place, round open and built with clean lines of white alloy and glass. Its design was unmistakably human, but its layout welcomed all. Inside, there were no raised platforms, no head tables, no symbols of rank. Just circular rooms with equal seating, soft lighting, and views of the stars. At its heart was a charter etched into a wall of polished stone, all voices equal, all choices respected. The council debated for days. Some called it a trap. Others called it a test. But Ambassador Lyra did not wait. She boarded a small civilian vessel, left her guards behind, and flew alone to the coordinates. When she arrived, she found no soldiers, no scanners, no demands. A young man in a simple gray uniform met her at the airlock. His name was Jake Morrison. He offered her tea and a warm smile. "We weren't sure anyone would come," he said. "I had to," Lyra replied. "We've been wrong." "For a long time," Jake nodded. "We know. But that's not why we built this. Then why? To see if you're ready to try again. Not as rulers and subjects, not as users and tools, just neighbors." Lyra looked around the calm, quiet space. No alarms, no tension, just peace. She felt tears in her eyes, not of shame, but of hope. Word spread quickly. Within weeks, others came, not as official envoys, but as individuals. A Qatari engineer who had once worked with humans on Mars. A Brack medic who missed the human-designed healing gels. a young silk artist who wanted to learn human brush painting. Each was met with the same kindness. No grudges, no lectures, just open hands. The council watched, stunned. They had expected demands, reparations, maybe even revenge. Instead, humanity offered a table. Back on Earth, people followed the arrivals with quiet interest. In Chicago, students watched live feeds of the Concord's first cultural exchange. A Zenthari musician playing a flute-like instrument, while a human pianist joined in. In New Erie City, engineers shared schematics for water purifiers with visiting Qatari technicians. Not as secrets, but as gifts. Captain Daniel Brooks stood once more at the Lunar Command window. Lena Ford joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "They're learning," she said. "Slowly," Daniel replied, "but they're trying." On the Concord, Lyra sat with Jake in a sunlit lounge. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not wait longer? Or never come back?" Jake looked out at the stars. Because silence was never the goal. It was just the first step. You can't build trust on lies. You have to clear the ground first. He paused, then added, "We missed you too. Just not the way you were," Lyra understood. Humanity hadn't rejected the galaxy. They had rejected the old rules. And now they were offering new ones. Meanwhile, deep in the Sol system, Project Horizon was no longer a secret. Human ships equipped with the new drive began making short jumps, not to flee but to explore. They visited dead worlds, mapped nebulae, and left data buoys for anyone to use. No ownership, no claims, just knowledge, shared freely. Admiral Frank Holt watched the first Horizon-class vessel vanish into FTL space. He didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed. "We're not hiding anymore," he said to no one in particular. "We're just choosing who we walk with." On Mars, Tyler Grant taught a mixed class of human and alien students how to build a solar converter from scrap. "The trick," he said, "isn't the parts. It's the patience." In orbit, Commander Nina Patel received a new kind of signal, a joint request from 3 non-human worlds asking for help repairing a failing climate grid. This time the message included the words, "Only if you're willing." No pressure. She approved the mission. And on Earth, Chloe Martinez stood in her schoolyard looking up at the sky. Her teacher had told the class that the Concord was now hosting its first joint science fair. Chloe raised her hand. "Can we go?" "Maybe next year," the teacher said. "When they've earned it," Chloe smiled. She knew what that meant. Trust wasn't given. It was built. One honest word, one shared meal, one repaired engine at a time. At the Concord, Lyra prepared to leave. Before boarding her ship, she turned to Jake. "What happens now?" Jake shrugged. "We talk, we listen. We make mistakes. We fix them, together." It wasn't a grand promise. It wasn't a treaty. But it was real. As her ship lifted off, she looked back at the Concord, small against the stars, but glowing with light. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt like it might become a home for everyone, not just the powerful. And far away, on a quiet porch in New Mexico, Carl Ruiz watched the evening sky. A single star blinked brighter than the rest. He smiled. "Welcome back," he whispered. The silence was over. Not with a bang, not with a speech, but with a question asked in kindness. "So, where do we go from here?"